Hello indie game fans, it's no secret that I love Metroidvania games, so here's a relook at the best in the market right now. Some changes in ranking since my last video, and if you want more recommendations for Metroidvania games, do check out my video on hidden gems as well. Since it will be brought up, no, the Ori games are not considered indie since they are a first-party Microsoft studio, and I do have to give a similar allowance to something like Monster Boy and the Cursed Kingdom as well, since it's from a larger team with a classic IP and doesn't quite fit my definition. So with all the caveats out of the way, let's get into the list. One of the original titles that got me into indie games in first place is Guacamelee, the luchador and Mexican themed entry which I absolutely adore, so I have to give my thanks to Drinkbox Studios for getting me started on this YouTube journey. The Gold Edition has since been updated to the Super Turbo Championship Edition, adding new bosses and areas, and is the definitive way to experience this classic. There's a sequel, but I do still prefer the original, so give this a go if you have not. The very Ninja Gaiden-like The Messenger, impressed with the pixel art and the dimension and time travelling twist, which then made you backtrack and explore previous levels, which was wonderful. I think that the traversal mechanics in this was pretty neat, allowing you to pass through a level without touching the ground if done right, and has one of the best writing in indie games that I have seen. Love the pixel art, and if you've been craving for more, the developer did release the free Picnic Panic DLC, which is fantastic, but due to the level-based structure, perhaps this isn't as pure of an entry. Another amazing looking entry that might not quite fit with the definition is Blasphemous, a brutal pixel art title that taps on religious motifs. It's from a developer from the south of Spain, and in line with the horrors of the Spanish Inquisition, managed to translate some of that into the game with themes of penance, sacrifice and atonement. Since launch, the developers have been constantly updating this, putting out two major updates in The Stir of Dawn and Strife and Ruin, along with a multitude of quality of life improvements, as well as the usual bug fixes and balancing changes. As a pixel art fan, I do have to give it its due, being one of the best looking modern games using this art style, so if you want something dark and brutal, this is my go-to recommendation.
Por siempre os bendigo en la muerte.
Rabi-Ribi does get a lot of flack due to the character designs, which is understandable, but putting aside the anime portraits, the pixel art of the characters themselves is not too bad, where this does shine in the gameplay and action. This is from a Taiwanese developer who recently celebrated the 5-year anniversary of this title, having been putting out DLC since launch, including new areas, an orchestra recorded version of the soundtrack and more, so certainly worth going back to. It does seem to have some Toho influences due to the bullet hell style boss fights, which makes the screen very busy, but another one which may be overlooked due to the aesthetic, which is why I have to mention it since it's worth a play. One of my favourite indie games of all time, let alone in the Metroidvania genre alone, is Yoku's Island Express, the self-styled pinballvania, which is exactly what it is. Let's face it, the Metroidvania can feel a little samey after playing through so many of them, so the ingenuity, let alone the freshness of combining pinball into this genre is simply excellent. I like how the pinball tables are integrated into the world design itself, but the cohesiveness of the entire game is just a sight to behold, not to mention the excellent soundtrack and chill vibes as well. It's a smaller experience where you can see some ideas not being fully developed, but in spite of that, a fantastic game overall that I cherish dearly. A new entry to the list is Record of Lodoss War-Deedlit in Wonder Labyrinth, a fantastic looking pixel art entry that taps upon a classic IP. Yes, it's very similar to Symphony of the Night, but since there isn't a convenient way to play that on modern platforms, and if you're sick of the umpteenth time that you are replaying that game, then I would recommend that you check this out. Ever since it was revealed and throughout the early access development, many of you have sounded off on the IP, being a Japanese fantasy novel from the 80s and was basically Japanese D&D and Lord of the Rings, and did also have an anime series that people seem to love. While I don't have that same kind of nostalgia, I was wholly impressed with this and want to see what's next from this developer. The oldest title on this list is perhaps beginning to show its age with Valdis' story Abyssal City, one that I showcased just recently on the community page, and people do love this title. It does have a little bit of Devil May Cry in this, with the combo-focused combat, with fascinating world building as you explore the ruins of a fallen holy city. Despite what the trailer shows, there are a number of different playable characters, as well as weapon and build variety, so plenty of reasons to stick with this game. The combat animations are very smooth and the combos are excellent as well, simply having a great game feel, but the art style does grow on you as well. Interestingly, this is from developer Endless Fluff Games, who you might know from last year's excellent tactics title, Fey Tactics, so it's very interesting to go back to their earlier title if you have not played this. Simply put, I absolutely love the look of Iconoclasts, a vibrant pixel art title that is just so visually attractive. It's set in a world where it's illegal to be a mechanic, with a militant religious organization imposing the rules and hunting down perpetrators, so play as the renegade mechanic Robin as she uncovers the secrets of a dying planet. The action is excellent, combined with wrench-based platforming, puzzles, upgrade systems, and a compelling central narrative, and you got me hooked. It's an inspiring story in indie development as well, where this developer worked on it on and off for 10 years or so, being his magnum opus so to speak, and luckily or inspiringly, the title seems to have sold well enough, which did not mean effort down the drain. Environmental Station Alpha is a case of, if you know, you know, but if you don't know, listen up. While it doesn't look the fanciest and is a 6-year-old game at this point, the simple pixel art of this does work, where you explore an abandoned space station filled with all sorts of hazards and enemies. It's challenging in both the platforming and combat, with plenty of secrets to go around, and is secretly one of the best games in the genre that not enough people have experienced. If you trust my judgment and have not played this, do yourself a favor and pick this up. Developer Image and Form did hit a home run of an idea with the SteamWorld franchise, having steampunk robots forming the basis of the universe spread across Metroidvania, tactics, tower defense, and deck building RPG, where people should be most familiar with SteamWorld Dig and the sequel in particular. While it does continue the story from the first game, it's perfectly fine as a standalone title where our protagonist searches for her missing friend. As with the dig in the title, this has you mining for minerals, selling these for cash, and using it to purchase more upgrades, forming the core of a very compelling gameplay loop. I like the upgraded visuals of the sequel, as well as the new upgrade options and abilities, making it a no-brainer for the list. Developer Team Ladybug goes 2 for 2 on this list with Touhou Lunar Nights, as well as Deedlit in Wonder Labyrinth covered earlier. While the Symphony of the Night inspiration of the earlier title is excellent, I think that there's more meat on the bones of this game and it's a better experience overall. It does use somewhat of the open source IP of the Touhou project, where you play as Sakuya, a maid with the ability to manipulate time who awakens in a strange new world after being sent by her master. It does have a very similar pixel art look, which seems to be common for Japanese developers, which does look fantastic in my opinion. The bullet hell style boss fights like Rabi-Ribi covered earlier is a highlight, again going back to the Touhou roots of the bullet hell shoot 'em up, so I love everything about this game. Things have a funny way of coming around full circle in indie games, which is the case with the 8-bit excellent Axiom Verge, of course paying tribute to Super Metroid. It has one of the most surreal and unique sci-fi settings, with a unique glitchy twist where the weapons that you obtain are not what they seem and thus feed into the overall sense of wonder and exploration. Some impressive pixel art as well, especially in the designs of the giant bosses, and it's old school in design where you might get a little frustrated on where to go next. However, love the retro feel, and if you want more, look out for the sequel, which should be launching sometime later this year. In reordering this list of the best Metroidvania games, I realized that I put Momodora Reverie Under the Moonlight way too low the last time around, so bumping it up to number 3 since this pixel art entry is really one of the best. The technically 4th entry in the franchise is the most polished and expensive to date, where you play as a priestess wielding a maple leaf, having to battle through the cursed land in order to seek an audience to the queen to get the help she needs to dispel evil from the world. I like the dark and moody atmosphere, akin to something like Bloodborne but not as grotesque, where the boss fights and designs are the main highlight. The developer did go on to make a more Souls-like entry with the 2.5D Minoria, which was not as well received, but if you're a fan of this series, do know that there is a new Momodora game in the works, so please be patient and I'll let you know when there's more news. Without surprise, I have to give my Game of the Year 2019 a high spot since Bloodstained Ritual of the Night is a return to form for the self-styled Iconoclasts. and was helmed by none other than the man Koji Igarashi himself, often credited as one of the main drivers behind the RPG leanings of Symphony of the Night, which has led to the modern Metroidvania. What a story it was as well, from Konami essentially kicking out or blacklisting their developers, to the highly successful Kickstarter campaign, multiple delays, the lukewarm reception to the backup builds, and the complete visual overhaul of the game. So it was somewhat of a miracle that this game is as good as it has been. Since launch, the developers have gone ahead with their plans for post-launch support and multiple free DLCs, including new playable characters, a retro classic-vania mode and more, so I'm excited to see what's next from them.
Invert!
And in perhaps the most obvious choice, Hollow Knight sits atop the mountain for being the indie Metroidvania of choice, and is one that turned many people onto indie games in the first place. It's a dark and moody title where you explore the bug-filled ruined kingdom of Hello Nest, where part of the charm is uncovering the backstory and world building in this, and of course, watching a lore video or two. I think that it still looks amazing, with some surprising amounts of variety in the biomes, and who can forget the boss fights in this. Also an amazing dev story, since I think Team Cherry comprised of 3 developers at the time, and for this title to be the phenomenon that it has been is nothing short of amazing. Of course, we do have Silksong to look forward to, which I absolutely cannot wait, but for how high the bar was set, this takes the number 1 spot. For more upcoming Metroidvania games to look forward to, check out this video and I will see you after the jump.